Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. I hope you're all having a fantastic day. Mark Consuelos is a familiar face to millions. Roles in daytime drama, later work on primetime shows, the cheeky charm on morning segments. For a generation that remembers rotary phones and black and white TV, he's the kind of celebrity that feels like a neighbor, someone who grew up on camera and grew up with us. But familiarity is its own kind of danger. When someone is always in the public eye, small changes are smoothed out by editing and cutaways. We learn to see the polished surface and forget the tremor underneath. Tonight begins with that familiar face sitting under lights that have seen 1,000 smiles. What no one expects is the quiet after a punchline, the pause that refuses to be edited away. Live television is a funny beast. It rewards spontaneity and punishes hesitation. There's an electricity to it, a promise to viewers that anything can happen. For someone like Mark, who has thrived in that unpredictable arena, live TV is both home and hazard. The studio hum, the see-through confidence, the feeling that you must always be ready to deliver, that pressure accrues in ways the audience never sees. Years of performing can teach a person to tuck things away, to switch on persona like a lamp. But humans are not appliances. The lamp flickers. Tonight, something flickers in plain sight. Most of the time, the signs are small. A slower laugh, a forced anecdote, a hand that lingers on a prop. In close-knit professions, people notice. The makeup artist, the sound tech, the producer who has worked late nights and shared slices of hospital cafeteria pizza. They begin to whisper, not gossip, but concern. Yet in cultures of competence, concern often wears the costume of business as usual. We tell ourselves that performers are resilient. We count on them. And so the small signals go unread. They are the paper cuts that precede something deeper, the fine cracks in what looks like stone. Behind every public person is a private life that most of us will never know. Marriages, children, an aging parent, the long silence between doctor's appointments and phone calls that end with, "We'll know more tomorrow." The audience sees the awards and the interviews. They don't see the midnight texts or the therapy sessions that feel more like triage than healing. The hidden battle is rarely dramatic in the way tabloids want it to be. It's cumulative. It's the repetition of small defeats that over time feel heavier than any headline could convey. In America, the men of the baby boom and early Gen X generations were taught to be stoic, to shoulder burdens and not speak of them. For men now in their 50s and 60s, weakness was a taboo. Seeking help could feel like a betrayal of identity. Even for a man who grew up on screens made of light, the cultural script of masculinity can be darker than any studio backlot. To say you're struggling risks being reduced to an archetype, unstable, unreliable, unwell. So men tuck their hurts into pockets and keep going. But pockets fill, and sometimes they spill in the most public way imaginable. The cameras rolled like they always did. There was the banter, the script, the cue cards passed like little white flags. But history is made of small deviations. That morning there had been a call, a terse message, a doctor's note, a delay. He laughed through the opening, but someone later said the smile didn't reach the eyes. The crew noticed, and the crew cared. Still, the show must go on. That phrase is both practical and dangerous. It asks humans to perform resilience as if it were a wardrobe choice. On that day, a line was read and a story was told, and then something unanticipated softened the room to silence. It was a throwaway line, an ordinary setup in a larger segment. A guest made a joke, the host smiled, and then Mark, mid-sentence, paused. What followed was not theater, it was a human breakdown, a flinch, a breath, and then a quiet that sounded louder than applause. In the stillness, viewers at home could feel that a wall had shifted. The production room froze, the lights didn't change. For a nation practiced in quick edit comfort, the moment was rare and raw. For those who were there, it felt less like a performance failing and more like someone finally letting a long-held exhale slip free. After the camera cut, the world behind the lenses reorganized itself into two urgent tasks: care and containment. The immediate priority was the person in front of them. Crew members quietly guided, a fellow host took an improvised moment to steady the show, producers signaled for a music bed. Simultaneously, the PR machine, for better or worse, began its calculus: statements, phrasing, the balance between privacy and the public's appetite. In the middle of it all was a person who had shown a fissure, and the team that loved him had to decide whether to protect him, to explain, to be honest, or to shield him. Those are not simple decisions. News cycles prefer certainty. They also thrive on emotion. Within hours, speculation swirled. The internet, a hall of mirrors, reflected different versions of the same moment. Some readers demanded answers, some offered sympathy, a few rushed to judgment. For the person at the center of the story, this was a second exposure, the first being the moment on air, the second being the court of public opinion. There is a cruelty to anonymity. People feel freer to assign causes to a stranger's pain. Yet nothing good comes from inventing narratives about someone else's darkest hour. What if the most courageous response is a simple, human truth, a brief statement that names, not diagnosis, the feeling, exhaustion, grief, overwhelm?
Celebrities sometimes choose to speak directly. Other times they lean on loved ones to be the voice. Humility can disarm a rumor and invite a human response. It tells fans, "I am not perfect, I am trying." For audiences in their 60s who remember when apologies and confessions were rare, such vulnerability can be a small revolution. It shifts the narrative from spectacle to shared experience. In the middle of any public crisis, family becomes both sanctuary and beacon. Spouses, children, parents, they translate headlines into context. They remind the world that the person at the center is beloved, fallible, human. For audiences in their 60s, themes of family resilience resonate deeply. Grandparents who tended wounds, spouses who mended patience. When a known public figure shows pain, families can reclaim the story and say he's more than a moment on a screen. That reclamation is often done quietly, in living rooms, over cups of coffee, and it's where real repair begins. There is courage in picking up the phone to call a professional. Therapy, counseling, and medical support are not signs of weakness, they are tools for sustaining life. For men of a certain generation, that shift in perspective, from stigma to acceptance, is still recent. When a public figure chooses care, it normalizes the act for others. It says to someone in small-town America watching from a recliner, it's okay to ask for help. That alone can be a transformational gift, far larger than any awards shelf. Recovery is patient work. It comes in increments: a night of sleep, a good conversation, a small victory over an old fear. For someone in the public eye, these increments are also private. They are not meant for the cameras, and yet the public waits for signals of normalcy: an interview, a laugh, a return to routine. We tend to measure recovery as though it were a finishing line. It's not. It's a series of small restarts. In those restarts, gratitude begins to outnumber panic, and the person who once paused mid-sentence starts to find his voice again, quieter perhaps, but truer. Friends who call at odd hours, neighbors who bring casseroles, and faith communities that gather in quiet prayer, these are the scaffolds that keep people standing. For our viewers in their 60s, it's a familiar pattern: communities that rally, often without pomp, with small, practical acts of tenderness. They create a context where a person can feel less alone. When a public figure is seen leaning into community, it tells an even wider audience that connection matters more than image. And sometimes that human connection proves more lasting than any spotlight.
What should we, as viewers, learn from watching someone we admire in pain? First, be kinder in the pause. When someone flinches in public, our job isn't to diagnose, but to witness with compassion. Second, recognize the limits of curiosity. We can care without consuming. Third, remember your own vulnerability. The person on the screen could be anyone's son, neighbor, or friend. For audiences in their 60s who've seen hard times and survived, these lessons echo old wisdom. Tenderness costs nothing and gives much. Practical support is often the most meaningful. A phone call that says, "I'm here," not "what happened." An offer to run errands, a meal left at the door. For those who want to help a public figure, fan mail that contains empathy rather than expectation can be healing. For regular people, the same principles apply to friends and family. When someone steps back from spotlight to heal, the most helpful thing we can do is to uphold their dignity and allow them space. Small gestures become a quiet chorus of care. The media that reports on moments like these has power, and with power comes responsibility. Sensational headlines sell, but they also wound. Ethical reporting recognizes the humanity at the center and resists the temptation to exploit pain for profit. A responsible outlet verifies, contextualizes, and prioritizes dignity. For viewers in their 60s who remember a time when newspapers were gatekeepers, this might feel like a callback to slower, more careful journalism. The question is not whether the story will be told, it will, but how it will be told. Sometimes a public setback becomes the soil for reinvention. We've seen careers shift after crisis, not always linearly, but often more honestly. People return with different priorities, roles chosen from meaning rather than PR, interviews that focus on service, projects that turn personal pain into public good. For a mature audience, that arc is familiar. Life refashioning its pieces into a new mosaic. If someone uses their platform to shine a light on healing, the ripple benefits can be immense.